club that I'm going to be studying tomorrow. Trust me.
Perfect. All right, hold on. It's about to go live on YouTube. And then I'll go live here. All right, now we're going to, let's do this. Shut that. Go to my Zoom. All right, done. Now record. Start recording. All right, so we're live and we're recording. This is a new edition of the Tour Coach. Joining me here is Jackson Court, who's off and on here with me, and then my good friend, and to me, this is one of the cool ones that we get to do because he's a legend in the instruction business. Long before I had the opportunity to meet him down at Doral, I admired all the work he did, and I can remember all those old Golf Digest covers with you and Phil and all the people on it. But teaching legend, Hall of Famer now since the last time I had you on, Rick Smith. And before we even get into the golf, you're sitting in a place I would love to be, down in the Keys. Everybody that listens to this knows how much I love the Keys. And there's tarpon right off your dock. I mean, how good is this?
Buddy, in about 15 minutes, if we don't wrap it up, I'm going to go get bait, and we're going to catch one live.
Catch us a live tarpon. Look, we were talking before we got on air. Jackson, you hadn't gotten on yet, but we were talking about how the business has changed, right? Okay. And how it's different getting in the business as a young person now. Rick, talk a little bit about how did you get started in this business, and how have you seen it change over the years? And then the last question is, and do you think all the changes that are gone on are necessarily better for the player?
Okay. Well, to start in order, I started a long time ago, and obviously I'm not getting any younger. I'll be 67 in October. So far I've had a lot of different decades of different things that happen, and it's been an interesting time in my life now because yes, there's all this technology now, but back then, Rocco and I were laughing the other day. I remember 1979, 1980, 1981, 2, 3, when I was playing, I made a portable cart thing that you could put a TV and a DC adapter into your VCR that was this big. And I had my camera, and I had magic markers and a ruler and a towel. So I was looking at shaft planes. I was looking at spine angles. I was looking at things that I'll never forget, giving a lot of lessons when a guy said back then, he goes, "I'm coming over." And I go, "No, you aren't here." And you could see the shaft plane of the club coming under, and he's flipping it over. I said, "No, you're coming over the bottom, pal." I go, "You're flipping it from the underneath." And they're going, "How do you know that?" I go, "Look at this video." So I had it was a VCR with giant tape, and that's how it started. And then that is all we had. The other thing I had, I'll never forget, even when I was younger than that, going to the Ryder Cup, Jack Nicklaus leaves the tee, and I'm looking at his footprints, and I'm seeing this deep, and I'm going, this is not a light-footed game. There's pressure. There's something going on here. So we didn't have pressure plates in 1977, but you could see the ground destroyed by every good player. And so that was interesting. And then you talk to the great ones like Jack Nicklaus, and you talk to, and you would talk to them about feels. No different than Jack Nicklaus saying, "I never really thought about my hips ever." He said, "I knew where the club was all the time, but when I wanted to draw it, I loaded into my glute, into my right heel, and I'd go to the ball of my left foot." George Knudson said it. Hogan said it. He goes, "When I want to hit a fade, I go to the middle of my right foot going back, and I go to the left heel." See, so now you can measure all this stuff, but this stuff, I was around all this, a long time ago, and you learn that you look at the ground that they're standing on, and you talk to them about the feels that they have. You can certainly see things, but the video back then with rulers and magic markers were fine for me. It's like I had enough information back then to help someone. And those were good years, the 90s. Lee Jansen wins a couple opens that decade. Rocco's winning, Billy Andrade and other guys. And then it was Phil Mickelson in the late 80s or late 90s. And then we got a whole different decade in 2000. Phil wins 3 majors. We had great success then. And now you move to the next decade and I'm going, oh my God, it's 2024. Here we go again. Jonathan Vegas. But, you've got to be careful when you use technology, no different than you and I just talking about. Even Doral, when Steely came in, I didn't use a quad. I didn't use anything. I didn't use my 3D gears, which I love. I use that stuff for the great players in off season. And I know you do too. I think there's a time and place for it. And then even videos, sometimes I don't even want them to look at it because they're going to look at something I don't want them to look at. So it's like, no, it's fine. It's fine. Because they get picky about things that really they don't have to be picky about. And they start putting their mind in the wrong place. So time and place for everything, no different than there's a time to get the hell out of the way and let the player be a player. And you know me, I'm in and I'm out. If I hadn't done my job, and ultimately, really, Tony, I think, and you do a good job of it too, is if we've done our job as a teacher, we're teaching them to teach themselves anyway. And I'm not going to hold their hand ever, because it's a mistake. I was a player. I don't want somebody in my ear every 5 seconds. Let me go. Let me be who I am. Give me the direction. If I have a question, I'll let you know. But I got it. I got it, and I'm going to go ahead and work through it. Every great player that I've worked with would always say that to me. They'd say, "I'm going to go think about what you just said, and I'm going to process it, think about it, and then I'm going to put it into play."
I want to talk about, you've been around a lot of great players, talking about some of the greatest that have ever played the game, especially Jack, right? Arguably 1A. And then you got Phil would be he'd be in my top 5 for sure. Like,
yeah.
What are obviously different golf swings, but do you ever sit and go like, these are similarities between great players I've been around? Like, what are some things they do that they have in common? Because I think, like, for me, I love picking like your brain, because like I know the things I've learned from the great players, but I like to find out more what great players do. Because like, to me, I feel like I had a young player in Alabama this evening, good high school player. And like, the more I can share what they do, I can figure out these great players, I got a chance to make a real difference on a young kid that's maybe 16 or 17 if we can figure it out earlier. What were some of the things you saw that were commonalities, if any?
Well, one thing I'll never forget, Raymond Floyd, who I had a chance to work with back in the day, he was now a senior, unbelievable, would win on both tours. He was in a slump. And I said to him simply, I go, look, you've done this before at a great level. What was the best you ever played? So I then would study that swing. For example, he said, the best I played Shinnecock. So I go, well, let's go into the Shinnecock films. And I would study the Shinnecock films. It was like cheating. I'm looking at what he's doing, and I'd look and I'd do a side by side, and I go, look, he would always work the club way inside. He'd lift it up vertically like he always did, and then he'd get it back down on plane. Well, back then, he got it deep early. He went up, but not really vertically, because then if he was too vertical, he dropped it on the inside too much, and he drop kicked it, he blocked it or hooked it. And I go, Raymond, we got to tighten this plane up here so that we can get more on top of it. And I go, look at the 2 videos, and I gave him a heavy club to keep him from lifting up. And Raymond goes, I got it, and he goes and wins the next week, So I guess my point is everybody's different. Everybody's got a different feel. With Phil, I never really ever tried to get him wide like it looks like he should be, because he got narrower because he didn't have a huge lateral. He had a lot of lower lateral with a lot of back side bend stuff. And so what I do is I'd let him get narrow here, and then I'd let him widen on the way down, because I knew that if I got him wide was going narrow and too narrow. He's already narrow enough. So let him feel wider down. So I just kept finding that everybody had their own issues. Right now, commonalities, we could talk for hours about commonalities, but everybody had an issue, and it even stemmed from going back when they were younger. I think about Lee Jansen. Lee Jansen, he would slide to his target, he'd side bend, he'd extend down the target line, and he'd flip it over, right? So I'd go, Lee, you got to understand your fundamentals of arc, and no different than now with Jonathan Vegas. I went to, when he came to me 4 or 5 months ago, I go, do you understand the arc? And do you understand that you're standing beside the ball? There's nothing linear here. There's nothing straight back, straight through. And he had gotten a little bit off by losing concepts and images of what he really needed to do from chipping to full swing. And it was more of what was in his head rather than anything else. And you and I both know that there's pitfalls to everything, right? So knowing the pitfall before it happens is so critical too. And I think good teaching, if you go down this road, and here's my part of my story with Raymond Floyd. I said, Raymond, we're striping it. I want to teach my guys, all 10 of these guys here at Tiburon. We were at the Ritz at the time. And I said, let's do a fundamental lesson. And he goes, I'm with you. I go, no, but you really got to go with me on this. So I stick a shaft plane.
That's when you're like, he's not going to really like it once you start, right?
Well, like within 5 minutes, it could get really ugly. Okay, so here's Raymond that went in early, turned, and then he kind of paused, and then he'd work it back down. I go, Raymond, my teachers back here think that you got to get to a perfect place in the takeaway. I said, I want you to teach all my guys what you're going to do when you go hands in, club out. You're hitting shaft plane, the club's here, and then you're going to go ahead and hit it. He goes, I'm in, Rick. I'm going to try it. Let me try it. So I set up the shaft station, and I go, Raymond, just go with me. Just pretend you're coming here, and your fundamentals are off. So he goes, hands in, club out, clicks it. I go, okay, you got that feel? He goes, yeah, I'm going to hit it. He goes up. He's lost. He comes down, slides, hits about a foot behind it, and he goes, that was awful. And then I go to the, and I go to the teachers and I go, guys, all right, great job here, right? It's on plane, but guess what? The rest went to hell. He lifted up. He forgot to turn because when he goes hands in, club out, he wasn't turning. When he whipped it in a little bit, body was turned. He was in good spot, but his whole timing elements were related to his takeaway. So I changed that, and I was just making a point to the guys. Not everybody's the same. And Lee Trevino would tell you the same thing with his strong grip, aiming left. Everything was left, and the ball never went left. So the whole theory is it's like what method, what style works good for you, finding out what that is, and then sticking with it and not deviating it. Some of the teachers, great players, they drift away from their original guy and they're lost. They are lost. And one thing that I think when you earn the respect from a player, you went through all that stuff already. You found out what didn't work. You experimented with the guy. He wanted to experiment, and you found out what didn't work, especially the young guys you get that are going to be really good players. But you also learn from that experience. And I think it's, leave your ego at the door, but go in there with a plan of something that you think is going to help them and work with what you're seeing. Watch the ball flight.
Hello?
Get off the computer. Get off the TrackMan. Look, I've seen perfect zeroed out numbers, and it's the worst looking golf swing, and it's ineffective with a lot of players, especially at impact. Okay, there's 0-0 face. Post impact, extended, flipped over here. It looks awful. They don't hit it good. So I think you use your eyes, use the ball, learn that way. And then when you have technology, great. It just reinforces what the heck you're doing.
That's awesome, Rick. I think we might have lost Tony via service real quick. So until he gets back, I'm curious if through the time, how the equipment has changed, maybe what you've seen with players' motions.
Well, there's no question a golf club in today's world is superior. I mean, I remember in my playing days, and I was a good player, which I always tell all my teachers, be a good player, work to be a good player, because you're going to get more respect from about everybody you work with. And I think it's very, very important. I think one of the keys is he's basically, Tony's saying, lost you on the recording. I hope he's still with us. He just sent me a text above, but not sure if it's recording or not. Can you take a look?
Yeah, it says it's still recording, but he said he's restarting it.
Okay.
So, and I just pulled up the chat room, and he is not, and the participants list, and he is not in there. So I'm
Okay.
sure he'll be back here in just a minute.
Should we just stay? Are we recording still? Should we continue to talk?
Uh, um,
We
yeah,
can.
why not? Yeah, come
Well,
on.
let's keep talking. I think equipment is superior. Shafts are superior. I always dreamed of a time when I played to say, if I could find a shaft, unscrew it, put a different head in, adjust the head to my weight, to where the bias was, and work my ball, work with what I got that day. I mean, that would have been a dream. And it truly is there now. I mean,